Most people think a tourniquet is a piece of gear. It's not. It's a decision that permanently changes what happens to a human body. Make that decision too late and someone dies. Make it too early and you create damage that didn't need to happen. That's why this video is not about how to put a tourniquet on. It's about when you decide to use one, why that decision is made, and what that decision sets in motion after the bleeding stops. This is education and preparedness only. It does not replace formal medical training or emergency care. Everything we are talking about stays firmly in the civilian lane of hemorrhage control, reassessment, and stabilization, not invasive procedures. Let's start with mindset. A tourniquet is damage control, not first aid. A tourniquet is not first aid, it is damage control.
A tourniquet isn't a tool you reach for first, it's an escalation.
When you apply a tourniquet, you are making a deliberate trade.
When you apply a tourniquet, you're trading tissue for time.
You are sacrificing circulation to one limb to save the life of the whole patient. That is not a casual decision. Tourniquets are aggressive by design. They completely stop blood flow. That makes them extremely effective and not harmless. Every tourniquet is a controlled injury. We accept that injury because uncontrolled bleeding is worse. If you do not understand that trade-off, you will misuse the tool. Care under fire, care under threat changes the rules. You don't decide on a tourniquet in a clean room. You decide when it's loud, when it's dark, when your hands are wet, when you're trying not to become the next casualty. Under fire or under immediate threat, medicine is not your first priority. Your priorities are simple. Stop the threat, get to cover, prevent additional casualties. Because one injured person is survivable. 2 injured people is a problem. In this phase, the only hemorrhage control you realistically perform is the fastest and most reliable option available.
This isn't first aid, this is damage control.
That is why tourniquets appear early in tactical medicine, not because they are elegant, because they work when you cannot kneel, cannot hold pressure, cannot see well, and must move immediately. In threat environments, speed and reliability beat finesse. What bleeding actually earns a tourniquet? Tourniquets are designed to stop catastrophic extremity arterial bleeding, bleeding that kills in minutes, blood that is spurting, blood that is pooling rapidly.
Not every bleed needs a tourniquet. Pressure solves most problems.
Clothing soaking through immediately, partial or complete limb loss. Tourniquets are appropriate for severe bleeding from arms or legs that cannot be reliably controlled under current conditions. They are not for minor bleeding. They are not for bleeding easily controlled with pressure. They do not work for torso bleeding. They do not work for the groin, armpit, or base of the neck.
A tourniquet only works on arms and legs. It does nothing for the torso.
Using a tourniquet when pressure would have worked is unnecessary escalation, and escalation always has consequences. Environment and logistics force the decision. Even if bleeding might be controlled with pressure in a calm room, the real world rarely allows that. You escalate sooner when you must move the patient, when you are alone, when there are multiple casualties, when it is dark, raining, cold, or chaotic, when evacuation will be delayed. Tourniquets are not only about bleeding, they are about control in chaos. Time awareness, the clock that matters. Every tourniquet decision exists on a clock, not a stopwatch, a reality-based estimate, time since injury, time since tourniquet placement, time until definitive care. The longer blood flow is cut off, the more physiologic consequences accumulate. This clock matters for reassessment, for conversion, and for what happens after the patient reaches the hospital. Ignoring time leads to bad decisions. What a tourniquet does to the body. When blood flow stops past a tourniquet, oxygen delivery stops. Cells switch to anaerobic metabolism. Lactic acid builds. Potassium and muscle breakdown products accumulate. Nerves and muscles become ischemic. The limb becomes a contained ischemic compartment. This is acceptable temporarily, because the alternative is death. But ischemia is not harmless. The real risk is reperfusion. The danger is not just the tourniquet. The danger is what happens after. When blood flow returns, everything that built up floods back into circulation. Acidic blood, potassium, inflammatory chemicals. This can worsen shock, stress the heart, injure the kidneys. This is why patients sometimes deteriorate after bleeding appears controlled. Tourniquet conversion exists because of this reality. Why we convert tourniquets? We do not convert tourniquets primarily to save the limb. We convert to manage physiology over time. Conversion reduces ischemic duration. It limits reperfusion injury. It reduces systemic stress. It improves long-term outcomes. Conversion is not bravado. It is restraint. When conversion is appropriate, conversion is considered only when all conditions are met. Bleeding is completely controlled. The scene is safe and stable. Proper materials are staged. The patient can be continuously reassessed. You can immediately stop if bleeding returns. Conversion is gradual and reversible. If bleeding resumes, you stop. Leaving a tourniquet in place is often safer than a bad conversion.
Oh my God. It won't stop. Okay. Breathe. Stay with me.
When you do not convert when bleeding was clearly arterial, when the wound is deep, destructive, or irregular, when the patient is unstable, when evacuation is delayed or uncertain, when you lack manpower or monitoring, or when you are unsure. If you are unsure, stop escalating and reassess. Pain, panic, and human behavior. Tourniquets hurt. That pain is normal. Pain does not mean failure. Pain means the tourniquet is doing its job. Patients panic. Responders panic. Your job is to think clearly when someone else cannot. Calm beats chaos. Multiple bleeds and fixation errors. Anytime you apply a tourniquet, your next job is to look for the bleed you haven't seen yet. A second limb bleed. A junctional bleed. A slow but lethal bleed elsewhere. Fixation kills. Reassessment saves lives. Junctional bleeding. Where tourniquets fail. Junctional bleeding occurs where limbs meet the torso, the groin, the armpit, the base of the neck. These areas contain major blood vessels. Tourniquets cannot be applied here. Junctional bleeding kills because it is missed. Clothing hides it. Blood pools underneath the body. Responders fixate on limbs. They assume no limb bleed means no major bleed. Recognition is the skill here, not technique. Communication and handoff. Hospitals do not guess. They act on information. Time of tourniquet placement matters. Changes after application matter. Mechanism of injury matters. What you remember or forget shapes what happens next. Good handoff saves time. Time saves tissue. Tissue saves lives. What happens at the hospital? Once the patient reaches the hospital, the mission changes. Tourniquets are managed deliberately. Bleeding sources are identified. Damaged vessels are repaired or tied off. Fractures are stabilized. Reperfusion is managed. Shock is corrected. Infection is prevented. Healing begins in stages. Tourniquets rarely cause amputations. Severe injuries do. The tourniquet often makes survival possible. The hard truth. Not every limb can be saved. Not every patient can be saved. Sometimes the goal is not perfection. Sometimes the goal is doing the most good for the most people with the time you have. That is real medicine. Final takeaway, tourniquets are not about stopping bleeding. They are about buying decisions. Fast actions stop death. Slow thinking prevents damage. Preparedness means knowing when to escalate, when to reassess, when to stop, and when to leave things alone. This is survival. This is resilience. This is Suburban Prepper.